right.
All right.
Morning or slightly afternoon, midday. How about that? Happy midday to all of you. It's great to see a few people needing some coffee and exiting, but a lot of folks coming in as well. I'm really excited to have what's going to be an action-packed 20 minutes with you. My name is Darren Morey, and I lead Google Cloud's global startup organization. So those of you that have maybe met me before know that I'm very fond of saying that I've got the best job in show business. I get to wake up every day. I get to partner with people like I'm about to introduce. I get to meet founders and builders every day during the AI revolution. So that's not a bad gig, I would say.
No, not at all.
But what I also get to do is spend time with really smart people. And that's what we're going to do here in the next 19 and a half minutes, is give me a chance to tap some of the experience here of Tulsi Doshi. Tulsi is one of our senior leaders from Google DeepMind, and talk about someone with some relevant experience. Tulsi leans in as a senior product leader, both around Gemini foundation models, but overall generative AI. So something tells me there's a little bit that we're going to be able to talk about. So
Hopefully.
thank you for joining.
No, thank you for having me, and thanks all for being here.
So we have a lot of builders, founders in the room, as you and I discussed backstage. And one of the things that I'd love to get started with, Tulsi, is when you think about DeepMind, which has a few smart people in it, all joking aside, just some Nobel Prize winners in the organization, how do you guys think about the concept of taking all of that research that's been done, but think about bringing that into production, not only for companies like Google, but bringing it into production for folks sitting in this room? So how do you consider that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, so with at Google DeepMind, we want to push the frontier of research, but I think what we've also realized is that actually building in production and building with all of you actually helps push that research forward. Because actually, what really then allows us to push our models is getting real feedback from real people actually using the models to build amazing products. And while we are creative about what we want to build, there's so much creativity in this room and outside of this room of people trying to innovate with what we can do with our models. And so every time we see a new use case, that introduces new ideas of how we can create good evaluations, how we can train the models, how we can think about new use cases and way that the models can operate. And so I think something that's been really exciting, for example, with our latest series of Gemini models, if you take, for example, Gemini 2.5 Pro, is actually just seeing the wide breadth of use cases of what people are doing with the models, right? Ranging from code and amazingly beautiful web applications and code development to multimodal understanding and being able to break down a video into really amazing snippets. And we're actually able to see those kinds of use cases be built out. The agentic use cases that people are now building are incredible. And so we're actually able to take all of those use cases and then translate that back into the research and continue to push the development pipeline, which I think has been really great.
So that's a great point. And when you think about watching those use cases and creating that cycle, right, of kind of watching, observing, feedback, how does DeepMind do that practically? And then also, what kind of guidance would you give folks here that are probably early on their own product journey, and they also want to know how to take that customer feedback and iterate? So tell us a little bit about how you do that, and then any guidance or advice to the
yeah,
folks here.
it's a good point. I think one place that we're actually very lucky, I think, as Google, as kind of this end-to-end ecosystem, is that we do get to work with partners like Darren and others to make sure that we're bringing in feedback from the community directly into our models. And so one of the things that we do whenever we release models is actually spend a lot of time directly with customers, actually understanding how are different individuals using our models, what's working and not working, how do we bring that feedback back, figuring out how we create those types of feedback loops. I think we're also lucky in that we also have our own products, whether that is AI mode in Google Search or the Gemini app, where we can actually bring these models to bear for users. We also recently, for example, launched in AI Studio an awesome web vibe coding experience. If you haven't tried it, you definitely should. And that's been really fun too, because you get to actually see developers building amazing things and then using that feedback, not just to build a great experience for developers, but also to bring that back into the product. And I'd say we've learned a lot through this process. I think it's definitely been a learning process to see what is working and not working, because you want to get feedback, but we also want to build a product that customers love, and we also want to be respectful of your time and the work that you all are doing as well. And I think as someone who is building an early product, the biggest thing I would say is, your users are your litmus test more than anything else. And so getting that feedback as early as possible and figuring out ways to even get like small MVPs out that maybe aren't fully fleshed out or even full fidelity, but actually that allow you to test a particular hypothesis, that allow you to find particular breaking points. There's always going to be the edge case you didn't see coming when you actually put it in the hands of customers.
I think that's super helpful because I know for those of us that have been in technology for a while, even in the early days of cloud, we would spend time with builders and founders and talk about you can experiment like never before. But at some point, you have to convert from experimentation
To like production.
into
Yeah.
production, right? And so one of the areas that I know for all time we've been working with folks like here in the room is how do you future-proof, right? How do you look around the corner and not only shift from experimentation, but how do you work to try to make the right technical and architectural decisions early so that you're not painting yourself into a corner as you grow? So what reflections and experience do you have from DeepMind, from your own experience, that maybe folks here in the room could consider, again, about future-proofing their designs?
It's interesting because future-proofing also, I feel like, has changed a lot, Jaron, I think in the context of Gen AI. Because one of the things, we always want to make sure that what we're shipping is future-proof, and yet the field is changing so fast, and the capabilities of these models are changing so fast. And so one of the things that sounds maybe easier to say than do is almost build for where the models are going rather than where the models are now. So if you're building a product that is really generative AI based, if you're hopefully building a product based on Gemini, for example.
Hypothetically
speaking. I think that there's what the model is capable of today, right, which is already so much. But then there's also where we see the industry heading. And I think also knowing that these models are, iterating so quickly and this field is going so quickly, the best way you can future-proof is, I think, to predict a little bit of where you see the capabilities going. And so while you are building a product now, you can say, okay, well, I expect, for example, that maybe the models from an agentic perspective will improve in their tool use capabilities in the following ways. So I actually should be able to bet that in 6 months, the models actually will be capable of the following. And that actually allows you to be ready for what's coming and also build a product that is maybe more robust to how these models might change.
Excellent. When I think a long time ago, 2 years ago, I remember being in a customer meeting with our CEO. We were talking about AI, which was not being discussed that fluently yet. And Thomas Kurian, the cloud CEO, made a really interesting comment to the founder of this startup where he said, listen, Alphabet has spent decades creating the world's most trusted window into the internet. And we take that trust and that responsibility to an infinite level, meaning it's not something that's kind of a buzzword, it's not something we talk to analysts and investors about, it's something that's built into the way that we're thinking about innovating. I know DeepMind also holds a very, very high bar when we think about responsibility and trust, and I'd love to get your perspectives not only on how you see that coming to life for DeepMind. You and I have talked about some of the incredible use cases happening across industries, but also what guidance would you give builders and founders who, frankly, in our opinion, should be considering responsibility and trust in the core of what they're building?
Yeah, responsibility and trust is always interesting because it's always one of those areas where we want to make sure we're building the right thing. But even what is the definition of right? It differs industry to industry, product to product, use case to use case, right? So, two things I would say. The first one I would say is on the DeepMind side, the way we think about responsibility is you have to build it in from day one, right? So it builds in from every single choice you make. It builds in from the data, right? And when you think about what does it mean to have responsible data that is going into your model, it goes into the way we evaluate the models. So we always, every time we have a model that we release, we've done incredible amounts of safety testing on that model to make sure that we really understand how it performs across a different set of use cases. And then what also translates into how we deploy with customers and actually giving customers, builders, founders, flexibility over the safety parameters and choices where those make sense because your use cases might be different, right? There are certain use cases, I think, that we've gotten to work with that definitely responsibility is maybe more top of mind, right? So I'll give an example of, Huna, which is a early company that is doing incredible work around early stage cancer detection, right? That's a case where responsibility in terms of how are we thinking about what information to provide a user, how to think about precision and recall, how to think about safety is incredibly important, right? Similarly, if you think about the legal domains, safety and responsibility becomes incredibly important. And so, but they also, and that's not to say that it's not also important if you're building a consumer application. We think about safety incredibly deeply in the context of, let's say, the Gemini app. But what safety means in those use cases is different, and the kinds of levers you might want to have are different. So for example, in our Vertex and AI Studio platforms, we actually have configurable safety classifiers that you can actually modify to the use cases that you have based on what your thresholds might be for the product and the consumers that you have. And I think that's actually really, really important, is to make sure that, yes, our baseline is really thoughtful and intentional in terms of what we're building in the model, but that also what you have control over, as a developer, as a builder, is there as well. The second thing I would say about responsibility, though, is the word responsibility can mean a lot of things. And so to kind of break that down a little bit, I think when we think about responsibility, we actually have a set of AI principles that we build according to on our side from a Google perspective. And that is both about thinking about how do we prevent potential harm in the world, and how do we really think about safety when we build. But it's also about building with expertise, learning from expertise. So one of the things that we think is really important is, for example, actually working with external partners to do testing, to make sure that we get a range of feedback from different types of expertise. And that's something I would also recommend, especially if you're in a domain where maybe responsibility is either not as well defined, or maybe it is really sensitive because of the domain that you're in. I think actually figuring out, where is the expertise who can help you stress test the product, who can help you identify what is the most egregious, less egregious, even less egregious harms. How do we actually contextualize that for a user? What are the levers you have? Because there's things you can do with the model, but there's also things you can do in the product to give users more transparency and control. And I think thinking through that full kind of picture is really, really important.
That's excellent. When I think about trust and responsibility in an interesting maybe side point here, I have two daughters, a 22 and a 21-year-old. Both of them are leveraging AI built from DeepMind. One is a film and television student in New York using Flow and now 3.1 via 3.1.
That's awesome.
The other is a biomedical engineering PhD at Berkeley using AlphaFold. And so what's amazing to me is to be able to work for a company where your daughters are saying, hey, cool stuff, Dad, as if I built it, is pretty cool, gives me some star status. What I'm finding is the younger generation, again, in school, they are definitely being super thoughtful about trust and responsibility, what they're building, thinking about toxicity and the tone of the content. For those folks in the room that may not yet be building a company, but may be kind of even earlier in their career, do you have any advice as to how these folks can embrace some of the principles and values? How can they kind of help uplift some of this here in the San Francisco ecosystem, keeping trust and responsibility at the forefront?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, I love that that both your daughters are experiencing Gemini in
coast to
different
coast
ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is awesome. I think that's actually been part of the magic of working on Gemini, is getting to see just the wide range of what you can do. I think in terms of, if you're earlier in your career and actually that's in some ways the best time to start thinking about responsibility and trust, because I think the minute responsibility becomes an afterthought, like the minute it becomes something that you built your whole product and now you're like, oh shoot, how do I think about responsibility? It actually becomes really hard, because at that point you've already baked in a lot of how you're thinking about the model, and what you can do at the end, your levers become more limited. But I think if you start with the idea that even as you're prototyping, even as you're thinking about, hey, I'm just going to build something simple, what does good look like? Your definition of good should always have some notion of quality, right? So like, what is the user actually going to want to do with this, and is it meeting that quality bar? And some level of responsibility, which is, okay, what are the things that could go wrong, right? And I think at every step of the way, asking yourself, okay, who does this need to work for? And am I accounting for the wide range of people who are going to use this? What could go wrong, and how do I account for that in the way that I build? What are the different edge cases that this use case might have? And in many ways, this is, I think, product management 101. So I'm biased as a product manager myself, but I think it really is about bringing responsibility into those questions that you ask. And I think that the nice thing about doing this when you start in school or when you start building for the first time is it becomes habit. It becomes how you think about developing. And so then as you start building an actual product, it's a part of the portfolio rather than something that you now have to figure out how to tack on.
Great points.
Yeah.
So a lot of the folks in the room may or may not be student developers or earlier in their career, but I guarantee you, if we did a poll, which I won't make you do, folks in the room are considering themselves insurgents on a mission to do something different and change the
I
world.
love it.
Something tells me at the Disrupt conference, none of us want to be
We're trying to
incumbents.
disrupt.
We want to disrupt. I'm curious, when you think about everything that you're doing at DeepMind and the experiences you're having across dozens or hundreds of customers, a lot of the folks in this room are going to disrupt much larger enterprises that have had legacy for a long period of time. How do you think about disruption in an age of AI? And is there any nugget or two we could give some of the founders in the room who are seeking to disrupt the incumbents in their industry?
I mean, I think now's the time. I mean, not that that's the most helpful nugget of feedback, but I think that what's exciting about the models as they are today, actually, is that I really do think the individuals who are going to be able to disrupt the space the most are the ones who really learn how to use the models. I think there's a real art to understanding how to get the most out of a model like Gemini, or any of the models that you can get from across the labs, in the sense of how do you prompt the model to do the right thing? How do you eke out the best quality and performance? How do you orchestrate the model, calling it in many different ways maybe to get the right outcome? If you look at a lot of the products that I love, like one of the ones that I like to talk about a lot, is Notebook LM, which I can't claim credit for other than for the model. But it's a team of amazing folks at Google who have been putting it together. But they've been really, if you've used Notebook LM, you'll know it's an incredible product. And they've been really thoughtful about how to use the model, in terms of how to call it, when to call it, how to structure the calls, how to use the model to refine itself to get to a final amazing product. It's not a single, one shot, I called Gemini and I built this amazing product. It's a very thoughtful series of steps. And I think that the folks in this room, the more that you are someone who can play with the model, who is creative about how you use it, the more you're going to be able to disrupt, because you're going to be able to do things that others haven't even thought the models can do, that they already are capable of today. And I think that's the magic of what I really do believe generative AI can bring, because I think it can really democratize development and actually enable us to build more things if we're creative about how we use it.
That's great. So there's a theme that's been constant through our short time together, and that is skate to where the puck is, as they say, and you've kind of referenced that in a few different ways. You get to time travel every day, I get to time travel every day, and you and I were joking backstage that the stereotypical question is, what do you see happening in the next 3 to 5 years? I don't know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 hours, basically, but let's kind of agree to be in the middle.
3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, how about you wrap us up, Toshi, and you think about, let's say 1 year. If you had to predict what may be happening, I know you can't leak anything, but give us a little bit of insight into 1 year from now. What are some of the things that we may be able to expect?
Yeah, I think, and to conversation we were having backstage, we were talking about 3 to 5 years, and we were talking about how fast generative AI is changing and moving and how fast the space is growing. And I think we're going to see a ton of amazing innovation in the next 5 years, on this path to AGI. But I think even in the next year, I think there's two big things that for all of you that are founders and builders to be looking forward to. One is just your own productivity and development, right? So I think as we see more and more of these agentic experiences being built, I think we're going to see in the next year really robust approaches to memory and understanding context and being able to scale to extremely large contexts that allow you to bring all of your information into one place and make the model really an effective productivity assistant and agent for you. And that's going to be huge just for companies to be able to scale and build more quickly and efficiently. I think the other is, as the models get better, we're just going to be able to build more interesting product experiences, right? So I think about how the models are going to continue to get better at, for example, self-improvement. So actually learning from their own mistakes and continuing to iterate, being able to take from a previous example to influence the next example. And that means the kind of agents you are going to be able to build for your customers are going to be able to be much more personalized, much more niche, but still building and learning from the broader operational models that you're building. And I think that's going to be incredible in terms of the kinds of use cases we're going to see come through.
That's great. Like I said, you and I get to kind of live in this world every day, but it's the folks in this room that are going to bring some of these ideas to life. So I'm very thankful for the short amount of time you've been able to join us. And I'll close out by thanking everyone in this room. Obviously, Google Cloud has a stand that you may have seen where we have lots of teams, customer engineers, many of them I see hiding in the audience here that want to take some time to talk to you about what you're building. We want to get hands on keyboards. We want to help you. And then also we'll be hosting a number of programs throughout the day and this evening as well. So if you have questions for us, questions about Gemini, about DeepMind, come find us, and we're really excited to partner with all of you. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Yeah, thanks.